Hello, my name is Emily Steinel, and I am the Public Education Coordinator at the YWCA Center for Safety and Empowerment. Today, the intent of this presentation is to provide professionals and members in our community with the basic tools, information, skills, and resources to help us understand sexual violence and in turn support victims and survivors in our community. For those of you who are not familiar with our agency, the YWCA Center for Safety and Empowerment, formerly known as the Battered Women's Task Force, provides free and confidential services to victims and survivors of domestic and dating violence, sexual assault, human trafficking, and stalking in Shawnee, Jackson, Wabunsee, and Brown counties in Kansas. This is a helpful list of the services we provide. Please note that advocates are available 24/7 through our free and confidential helpline at 1-888-822-2983. All services that we provide at the Center for Safety and Empowerment, from our food and hygiene product pantry to our counseling and case management, are always going to come from an empowerment-based, survivor-centered, and trauma-informed approach. We also provide other options and services for survivors, such as some material or financial assistance when available, help with filing protection orders, responding to survivors at the hospital and law enforcement center, and more. Knowing the prevalence of sexual assault and the statistics that 1 in 3 women, 1 in 6 men, and 1 in 2 gender non-binary or trans-identifying individuals will experience rape or attempted rape in their lifetime. That means that many viewers are survivors or have known, loved, and cared for someone who has experienced sexual violence. Please take care of yourself as you go through this experience and engage in this information. This topic can be difficult, so make sure you have opportunities for debriefing. Plan some time to rest and decompress. We are always looking for statistics and numbers in this work as it relates to the number of people who are affected by sexual violence. Although it is important to understand the numbers and the extent to which these issues affect our communities, we also have to remember that sexual violence is extremely complex, difficult to measure, and notoriously underreported. These numbers are only a small fraction of the issue. Only about 30% of sexual violence is reported. What is vital to remember is that behind every number, behind every report of sexual violence, there is a real person, a survivor, with a very real story. Nationally, 1 American is sexually assaulted every 68 seconds. In Kansas, 1 rape occurs every 7 hours. In 2020 alone, advocates at the Center for Safety and Empowerment took 381 calls from sexual assault survivors. We had 21 sexual assault survivors stay at our safe shelters, and we provided counseling services to 89 survivors. Sexual violence is a serious and widespread problem. What we say and do about it matters. Due to the blame and shame that sexual assault victims oftentimes face, underreporting, lack of understanding of consent and definitions, and our overall cultural beliefs around sexual assault, we know that we are only seeing the very tip of the iceberg of this pervasive issue. Sexual assault prevention used to consist of telling people, particularly women, what not to do. The goal was to reduce your risk of being a victim. In essence, making sure the victim is someone else, not you. The problem with this type of prevention is that it places the responsibility on the victim, not on the perpetrator where it belongs. Additionally, by focusing only on women as victims, these kinds of prevention messages also ignore that sexual violence affects people of all genders. Additionally, it does nothing to change a culture that perpetuates sexual violence. There are no behaviors or choices that make a person deserving of rape or sexual violence. The only thing that puts a person at risk of sexual assault is the presence of a perpetrator. Sexual assault is never the victim's fault. Modern approaches to sexual violence prevention shift attention away from the victim's actions and rightfully focus on perpetrator behavior and dismantling the attitudes and beliefs that are the foundations of sexually violent behaviors. This is our iceberg. Modern approaches to sexual violence prevention once again shift attention away from the victim's actions and behaviors and focus on the perpetrator's behaviors and dismantling the attitudes and beliefs that are the foundations of that sexually violent behavior. To eliminate sexual violence, we must chip away at the base of the pyramid that allows for rape culture. We must look at our culture and the attitudes and actions that reinforce and excuse the actions higher up. A culture where sexual violence is normalized, joked about, and frequently minimized within our society. Rape culture is a way in which our society blames survivors for their victimization and tries to normalize sexual violence. Social inequalities, myths around sexual violence, victim blaming, jokes, media, video games, television, and even advertisements are all things that make rape culture possible within our society. Does anyone remember geometry from grade school and remember the difference between a rectangle and a square? They both have 4 sides, 4 90-degree angles. For a square, all sides have to be the same length, which is not true for a rectangle. So every square is a rectangle, but not every rectangle is a square. This is similar to sexual assault and rape. Every rape is a sexual assault, but not every sexual assault is a rape. Sexual assault is any physical contact of a sexual nature that is committed either by force, fraud, coercion, intimidation, or manipulation, or through the use of a person's mental or physical incapacity, including incapacitation caused by the use of drugs and alcohol. Rape is a term for sexual intercourse with someone against their will, using threats, coercion, manipulation, or intimidation, having sex with someone who is mentally incapacitated by drugs, alcohol, or a disability, or physically unable to consent because they are passed out or asleep, or with someone who is under the age of legal consent, which in Kansas is currently 16 years old. Sexual assault and rape overlap, but sexual assault is a wider umbrella. However, they are both rooted in power and control. We all have the possibility to harm others, and it's hard to boil a potato in salt water and then get all of the salt out of the potato. We are all cooked in the soup of rape culture, with the toxins already mixed into the broth. Sexual violence is rooted in our basic attitudes and beliefs. It exists on a continuum or spectrum of sexual disrespect and can range from verbal and cyber harassment to rape and torture. It's easy to think that behaviors such as catcalling or groping are minor or maybe even simply annoying, but these behaviors are serious, offensive, and sometimes illegal, and they pave the way for the very dangerous forms of sexual violence you see and read. The key is that the behavior is unwanted. This is what we talk about when we talk about the effects of rape culture. Blaming the victim, asking them what they were wearing, what were they drinking, why were they alone, why didn't you just leave or fight? Trivializing sexual assault by saying that boys will be boys or it's just locker room talk, sexually explicit jokes, tolerance of sexual harassment, inflating false rape report statistics, assuming that only promiscuous people get raped, defining manhood as being dominant and sexually aggressive, defining womanhood as being submissive and sexually passive, pressuring men to score, pressuring women to not appear as cold or prudes, referring to women as bitches, hoes, thoughts, and whores, slut shaming, assuming that men don't get raped or that only weak or gay men experience sexual violence, calling rape victims derogatory names, refusing to take rape accusations seriously and automatically trying to discredit the victim, teaching women to avoid being a victim of sexual violence, not holding rapists accountable, publicly scrutinizing a victim's dress, mental state, motives, and history, and even gendered violence in movies and television all allow for sexual violence to not only survive, but thrive in our culture and in our community. Sexual violence is rooted in power and control. This power and control wheel is a particularly helpful tool in understanding the different tactics and the overall pattern of abusive and violent behaviors, which are used by an abuser or a perpetrator to establish and maintain control over their victim. Sexual violence is not about sex. It is about gaining and maintaining power and control. While sexual abuse can be a form of physical abuse, we put it in a category of its own because it can include both physical and non-physical components of power and control. Because sex can be so loaded with emotional and cultural implications, there are any number of ways that the feelings around sex can be uniquely used for power and control. Sexual abuse refers to any action that pressures or coerces someone to do something sexually that they don't want to do. It can also refer to behavior that impacts a person's ability to control their sexual activity or the circumstances in which sexual activity occurs, including oral and anal sex. Stealthing or covert condom removal during sex, restricting access to or sabotaging birth control can all be forms of sexual assault and sexual violence. Some other examples of sexual violence include forcing you to dress in a sexual way, insulting you in a sexual way or calling you sexual names, forcing or manipulating you into having sex or performing sexual acts, holding you down during sex, demanding sex when you are sick, tired, or after hurting you with weapons or objects during sex, involving other people in sexual activities against your will, ignoring your feelings regarding sex, forcing you to watch pornography, unwanted kissing or touching, unwanted rough or violent sexual activity, rape and attempted rape, refusing to use condoms or restricting someone's access to birth control, keeping someone from protecting themselves from sexually transmitted infections or STIs, sexual contact with someone who is drunk, drugged, unconscious, or otherwise unable to give a clear and informed yes or no, threatening someone into unwanted sexual activity, making you feel like you owe someone because you are in a relationship, because you have had sex before, because they spent money on you or bought you a gift, giving you drugs and or alcohol to loosen up your inhibitions, playing on the fact that you're in a relationship, such as saying, sex is the only way for you to prove your love for me, or if you love me, you would do this. If I don't get sex from you, I'll get it from somewhere else. Reacting negatively with sadness, anger, or resentment if you say no or don't immediately agree to something. Continuing to pressuring you after you have said no, making you feel threatened or afraid of what might happen if you say no, and trying to normalize sexual expectations, such as, I need it because I'm a man. Did you know that for many decades, it was not illegal for someone to rape their spouse in the United States because culturally, sex was viewed as something you were entitled to when you were married or in a relationship? It was not until the 1970s that a person in this country was convicted of raping their spouse. Even in 2020, we fought to remove the spousal exemption from the sexual battery law. Sexual violence and domestic violence have many ties to one another, and sexual violence is oftentimes experienced within an intimate relationship, which can bring lots of complex dynamics and trauma. But it can also make it harder for that survivor to identify sexual violence as abusive, which can impact their willingness to report. Just because you are in an intimate relationship with someone does not mean that you have consent to have sex with that person whenever you want. As one survivor stated, when you are raped by a stranger, you live with a frightening memory. When you are raped by your husband, you have to live with your rapist. In fact, according to RAINN, 8 out of every 10 rapes are committed by someone known to the victim. This creates confusion in the mapping of our brain because we were taught from a very young age that strangers are dangerous, not our loved ones. So when someone experiences sexual assault at the hands of someone they know, love, and care about, it creates confusion in the brain. The survivor may not know how to respond or how to process, so they shut down or they may mentally disassociate. They may not even see the sexual abuse as a violation because the relationship that is in place or because it has been normalized to them. What they oftentimes will do is justify the abuse. They may blame themselves or find something that they did wrong to cause the behavior. Many survivors tell us that they want their relationship to continue, but they want the sexual abuse to stop. These folks are oftentimes probably someone that they've invested a lot of emotional energy in. Maybe they share memories together, children, a home, or even financials. This is why sexual violence continues to be one of the most underreported crimes by far. As humans, we value connection and a sense of belonging. Our brains create bonds and attachment and maps that connect certain people, those that we love, trust, and care about, to safety. Our friends, our family members, our partners, and our significant others. So when one of these people does something to hurt us, it causes that confusion in our brain. Because we were taught that we should be scared of the dark figure in the alley or the stranger in the parking lot. But what do I do when someone I love, someone I care about, and someone I trust does something to harm me or to violate me? Many times we don't know how to respond to this type of hurt, trauma, and abuse. So oftentimes survivors don't fight back. They don't report. They don't scream. They may shut down. They may forgive and forget. They may justify. They may mentally disassociate. Once again, they may find something that they did wrong to cause this behavior because there is confusion in how I should respond. Once again, no behavior or nothing that someone does is ever a cause of sexual assault. It is never the survivor's fault when they experience sexual assault and sexual violence. Alcohol and drugs also play a big role in sexual assault, and these types of intoxicants can increase vulnerability and are used strategically and intentionally by people who commit acts of sexual violence, almost like a weapon. While this certainly includes what we think of as date rape drugs, such as roofies or GHB, the most commonly used date rape drug is actually alcohol in itself. It is important to reiterate that when someone is under the influence of drugs or alcohol, they legally cannot give consent to sex. People use alcohol to decrease other people's inhibitions and judgments. Think about the use of terms such as panty dropper punch and beer goggles. They also use it to decrease their own inhibitions, to make themselves feel more outgoing, more likely to take risks. Think of terms such as social lubricant, liquid courage, and a shot of courage. Additionally, intoxicants provide perpetrators a social insurance policy, a way to shift accountability from themselves for harm they have caused and place that blame on the substances or on the victim. We have a double standard in our society where if a perpetrator is under the influence, we tend to blame the drugs or the alcohol. Whereas when a victim is under the influence, we blame the victim for using or for drinking. Perpetrators also know that when someone is under the influence, they are less likely to resist, remember, recall, and report. And they are also less likely to be believed. This brings us to talking about the perfect victim. The perfect victim is a person who responds exactly the way they are supposed to when we are victimized. For sexual violence, what does this mean? We oftentimes think about what we see in TV shows or movies, such as Law and Order. The perfect victim says no clearly and often. The perfect victim fights off the attacker like a honey badger. The perfect victim cries and shouts. The perfect victim has the courage of 100 quarterbacks. They bite and scratch. They spit and sob. What the perfect victim does not do is give in. They absolutely don't get wet. An uncontrollable physiological response that our bodies have to sexual assault. The discussion about the perfect victim is incredibly important. The perfect victim is the model in which all other normal, flawed human victims are judged. And trust me, we all come up short. Actual victims are haunted by the myths of the perfect victim, when in reality, the perfect victim does not exist. We tend to respond to threats in a very different way. I know survivors of sexual assault who have asked their rapist to use a condom, even offering one of their own, because it felt like the one thing that they had control over in an uncontrollable situation. I know survivors who have left their bodies. I know survivors who had said yes after being worn down all night over and over. You can only push someone off so many times. You can only say, not now, no thanks, I don't want to, in so many different ways. I know survivors who have tried to bargain, saying yes to the parts that they can endure, telling themselves that the experiences were not violations, that they weren't that bad, maybe attempting to restory the experiences after what had happened, a form of reverse logic to deal with the trauma. Some have sex they didn't want to because it is the least bad option. Sex was the known variable, a harm reduction tactic. Fighting and screaming, kicking and yelling, unknown outcomes. Would they hit back? Would they let me go? What if I fight and I lose? If I lose, will they be more violent? Do they have a weapon? Can I even outrun them? Will it be worse the next time? And don't take it solely from me. Take it from survivors of sexual assault. In this video, we are going to hear directly from survivors on why they did not report their sexual assaults. This video is emotional and the content can absolutely be triggering to some. So please practice self-care as you need.
I was 22 when I was raped.
I was 19. I was 20.
I didn't report it for, 1,000 reasons, a million reasons.
It was somebody I was involved with.
It was a friend of a friend.
My drug dealer.
Met this photographer by myself.
I got very drunk. I met some guy in this bar.
He started trying to kiss me and I said no.
He takes my left leg and raises it on his shoulder.
He went to put his hand in my panties and I tried to kind of deflect his hand, and that's when he slapped my hand away.
I blacked out.
I was fighting like pretty hard at this point, just saying no, please don't, please don't.
I came to.
Internally, I was shaking. I was really trying to look as calm as possible.
I could tell that something that I hadn't wanted to happen happened.
He held me down and he forced himself inside me.
I was being pleasant and nice just so I could remain safe and get out of there.
And I kind of just ran out into the street with like my pants on inside out and my shoes off.
And he sat up and he looked at me, and that was, I guess, the scariest moment for me because I could tell he was deciding whether he was actually going to stop or not, and that was the moment that I realized that I had thought I was in control of a situation that I was not in control of at all.
And I blame myself for putting myself in that situation.
I knew that I had no proof.
I could hear people's judgment saying, well, why did you do that? It was your fault.
I was still in like physical pain from this and sitting there going, oh, well, no one's gonna believe me.
It was my word against his.
Everyone was just gonna go, this girl just, slept with this guy and changed her mind.
I wasn't the perfect victim.
I figured, who's gonna believe some cokehead college girl?
I didn't try to fight him off, or I didn't slap him around, or, I didn't pick up the phone and call 911.
I didn't know that I was important enough to draw boundaries around what people could and couldn't do with my body. Who wants to come forward with the literal most violating thing that can happen to you, relive it, and then have people telling you that you're making it up?
And I thought I would just be better off trying to put this behind me.
I couldn't imagine pressing charges and then having to sit in a courtroom and look at his face over and over.
I thought, well, that's giving him what he wants. I'm spending more time on him, or spending more energy on this.
I imagine, and I think rightfully so, that it would have been more traumatizing for me in many ways had I reported it. It's up to a survivor to decide what they do with their story. It's up to them if they want to report it or not.
I don't want this to be a part of who I am.
I hated myself a lot at the time.
We are violated, we are harassed, we are touched, we are trapped, we're scared. And we just take a chip on the shoulder and we keep our lives going, and that's not fair to us.
And I think it would be wrong to tell them that they don't get to decide what happens next.
As we have seen demonstrated countless times, more often than not, perpetrators of sexual violence will walk free. To prosecute someone for sexual assault oftentimes means a re-traumatizing process that spans over several months or even years. That includes talking to complete strangers about what you have experienced, having your sanity, your decisions, your whole entire life put on blast in front of everybody in a courtroom. That video and this graphic from Rain demonstrates why it is so important that survivors of sexual violence have options, because reporting and involving yourself in the criminal justice system can oftentimes be re-traumatizing, and it may not be an option for everyone. It is important for survivors to know that they have choices. One of those options is for a survivor to complete a SANE exam or a rape kit. This can be done whether the survivor chooses to report to law enforcement or not. During a SANE exam, a specially trained and registered sexual assault nurse examiner provides dignity and trauma-informed medical care to victims and survivors of sexual assault. During a SANE exam, forensic evidence is collected in case the survivor chooses to report to law enforcement, although this is optional and not required to receive a SANE exam. SANE exams do not cost anything to the victim because the fee for the exam itself is charged to the district attorney's office. They can oftentimes take several hours to complete, depending on what steps the victim would like performed. Evidence is often easier to collect in the first 120 hours after the assault, and if the survivor has not showered, changed clothes, eaten, or brushed their teeth since the assault. It's uncommon, however, that a survivor would go immediately to the hospital without having first addressed their bodily needs. If the survivor has done any of these activities, it is still worth it to complete the SANE exam if the survivor wishes to do so. The SANE nurse has been specially trained to collect this evidence. The exam will include photographs of the survivor's body and any injured areas, hair combings from the survivor's head and pubic hair, fingernail swabs, and swabs from any area of the survivor's body that may have been penetrated, such as the vagina, anus, and mouth. The SANE nurse might also draw blood for a tox test to test for any drugs that may have been used to facilitate the assault. Certain clothing items and bedding may be collected as well. The survivor can then take a shower in the SANE office. Survivors have the right to refuse any part of the exam and can move through the process at a pace that prioritizes their safety and their comfort level. The survivor has the option to make a report in conjunction with the SANE exam, but it is not required. If the survivor wishes to make a report immediately, the SANE nurse will call law enforcement to come to the hospital to take a report. Law enforcement will interview the victim about the assault either before or after the SANE exam has been completed. A reported kit has to be processed within the first 30 days. If the victim is a minor, however, a law enforcement report is required. Survivors often refer to SANE exams and rape kits as the second assault. It is an extremely invasive, painful, and oftentimes re-traumatizing experience. An advocate may be present for any and every step of the exam and the report if the victim chooses. An advocate may also be in the room for the law enforcement interview. During this process, the advocate can ask the victim if they need any breaks, provide information about options of making a report to law enforcement, and see if the victim has any concerns or questions about the process, provide information on victim rights to confidentiality, provide emotional support during the exam, provide information about victim compensation, and provide support and acknowledge that this can be a very difficult procedure, and give permission to the victim to ask if the procedures need to be stopped when they feel uncomfortable or if they just need time to regroup. In 2021, advocates at the Center for Safety and Empowerment accompanied survivors for more than 45 SANE exams, a super big increase from just 6 in 2020. Survivors of sexual assault have the option to complete an unreported kit without making a law enforcement report. The evidence is collected in the same manner, but it is stored for 20 years with a call number. Within the 20 years that the evidence is being stored, the survivor may choose to make a report, and the evidence will have been preserved for potential investigation. However, making an unreported kit eliminates crime victim compensation as an option because there must be a law enforcement report number attached to the application, and an unreported kit would not provide that. Prophylaxis treatment for possible HIV exposure and Plan B, which is an emergency contraceptive, both are available during the SANE exam at no cost to the survivor. Getting prophylaxis treatment and Plan B at their own personal doctor afterwards would not be free, as it will be if it is received during the SANE exam itself. Each part of the SANE exam is voluntary. If the survivor chooses to opt out of any step, they may do so. For example, some survivors do not want to receive the tox test because defense attorneys may utilize information about the survivor have been drinking or under the influence of drugs during or before the assault in court as an effort to discredit them. The hospital may provide clean clothes, a toothbrush, and even a meal to the survivor if they are in need of these items. The clothing items are provided through a fund collected through hospital employees. Lastly, the SANE exam is also a time to plug in about Center for Safety and Empowerment Services and let the victim know that an advocate can meet them at the hospital to discuss the free and confidential services that can be provided. If the victim does not have a safe place to go after the SANE exam is completed, maybe shelter or relocation would be an option. Maybe they would be interested in sexual assault counseling and support groups, assistance with filing a protection from stalking or sexual assault order, case management, and other Center for Safety and Empowerment services. It is important to make sure that the victim has the Center for Safety and Empowerment information and hotline number so that if they wish to engage in services then or later, they have access to those resources when needed. Speaking of choice, we believe that everyone has the right to their own body and choices, which brings us to talking about consent. Consent is actually pretty simple. Everyone should be able to talk openly and freely about what activity they want to do and do not want to do. It's important for everyone to feel comfortable and safe every step of the way, every time. While the legal definitions of consent may vary by location and circumstance, the general concept is always the same. Consent is an ongoing process of discussing boundaries and what you're comfortable with. Consent is absolutely essential. It is an agreement between participants to engage in sexual activity. Consent should be clearly and freely communicated. A verbal and affirmative expression of consent can help both you and your partner to understand and respect each other's boundaries. Consent is all about communication, and it should happen every time for every type of activity. Consenting to one activity one time does not mean someone gives consent for other activities or for the same activity on other occasions. You can withdraw consent at any point if you feel uncomfortable. One way to do this is to clearly communicate to your partner that you are no longer comfortable with the activity and wish to stop. Withdrawing consent can sometimes be challenging or difficult to do so verbally, so nonverbal cues can also be used to convey this. The best way to ensure that all parties are comfortable with any sexual activity is to talk about it, check in periodically, and make sure everyone involved consents before escalating or changing activities. You get the final say over what happens with your body. It doesn't matter if you've hooked up before or even if you've said yes earlier and then change your mind. You're allowed to say stop at any time, and your partner needs to respect that. Consent is never implied by things like your past behavior, what you're wearing, or where you go. Sexual consent is always clearly communicated. There should be no questions or mystery. Silence is not consent. And it's not just important the first time you're with someone. Couples who've had sex before, and even ones who've been together for a long time, also need to consent before sex, every time. There are laws about who can consent and who can't. People who are drunk, high, or passed out can't consent. There are also laws to protect minors, people under the age of 18, from being pressured into sex with someone much older than them. The age of sexual consent is how old a person needs to be in order to be considered legally capable of consenting to sex. Adults who have sex with someone younger than the age of consent face jail time and being registered as a sex offender. The age of consent varies in different parts of the US and in different countries, but in Kansas, the age for consent is 16 years old. When in doubt, just remember fries. Consent is freely given without feeling pressured, forced, manipulated, or under the influence of drugs or alcohol. It's reversible. You can change your mind at any point about what you feel like doing. It is informed. You should know exactly what you are consenting to. It is enthusiastic. If it's not an enthusiastic and sober yes, then it is a no. You should only do things that you absolutely want to do. And it is specific to what is happening in the moment, not in the future. Saying yes to one thing does not mean that you have said yes to other things. So if you're still struggling with consent, let's talk about it as if we are asking someone for a cup of tea.
If you're still struggling with consent, just imagine instead of initiating sex, you're making them a cup of tea. You say, "Hey, would you like a cup of tea?" And they go, "Oh my God, I would love a cup of tea. Thank you." Then you know they want a cup of tea. If you say, "Hey, would you like a cup of tea?" And they're like, I'm not really sure. Then you could make them a cup of tea or not, but be aware they might not drink it. And if they don't drink it, then, and this is the important part, don't make them drink it. Just because you made it doesn't mean you are entitled to watch them drink it. And if they say no thank you, then don't make them tea at all. Just don't make them tea. Don't make them drink tea. Don't get annoyed at them for not wanting tea. They just don't want tea, okay? They might say, "Yes, please. That's kind of you." And then when the tea arrives, they actually don't want the tea at all. Sure, that's kind of annoying as you've gone to all the effort of making the tea, but they remain under no obligation to drink the tea. They did want tea, now they don't. Some people change their mind in the time that it takes to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add the milk. And it's okay for people to change their mind. And you are still not entitled to watch them drink it. And if they're unconscious, don't make them tea. Unconscious people don't want tea. And they can't answer the question, "Do you want tea?" Because they're unconscious. Okay, maybe they were conscious when you asked them if they wanted tea. And they said yes. But in the time it took you to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add the milk, they are now unconscious. You should just put the tea down. Make sure the unconscious person is safe. And this is the important part again. Don't make them drink the tea. They said yes then, sure, but unconscious people don't want tea. If someone said yes to tea, started drinking it, and then passed out before they'd finished it, don't keep on pouring it down their throat. Take the tea away. Make sure they're safe, because unconscious people don't want tea. Trust me on this. If someone said yes to tea around your house last Saturday, that doesn't mean they want you to make them tea all the time. They don't want you to come around to their place unexpectedly and make them tea and force them to drink it going, "But you wanted tea last week." Or to wake up to find you pouring tea down their throat going, "But you wanted tea last night." If you can understand how completely ludicrous it is to force people to have tea when they don't want tea, and you're able to understand when people don't want tea, then how hard is it to understand it when it comes to sex? Whether it's tea or sex, consent is everything. And on that note, I'm going to go make myself a cup of tea.
As I mentioned earlier, what we say and do about sexual violence matters. We know that survivors of sexual assault will oftentimes disclose that assault to their close friends first, those that they trust and feel safe with. So, how can we respond to disclosures of violence and abuse in a way that is free of shame and blame? First, we can offer the individual words of support and solidarity. Solidarity begins with caring and believing. Telling the person that you believe them and that they are not alone can be a powerful way to show your support. The second is asking how you can help. With the survivor's permission, you could offer to get them assistance from an outside person or offer to stay with them. And the third component is to connect them with resources, whether that's a counselor, a faith leader, a social worker, a victim advocate, or law enforcement. Very rarely can you talk someone out of their pain. However, being heard helps being hurt. Acknowledging the pain and the experience by listening and holding space. It is all about giving the survivor back their autonomy, choice, and control that was taken from them. They did not have control over what they had experienced, but they do have control over their healing moving forward. YWCA Center for Safety and Empowerment is here for you to provide free and confidential services to survivors of sexual assault and domestic violence 24/7, 365. Whether you are single, dating, married, or complicated, we believe that everyone deserves safety, support, and respect. If you have experienced sexual assault or domestic violence and you want to support a friend who has, or maybe you just have questions and you want to talk, advocates are available via our 24-hour helpline at 1-888-822-2983. Thank you so much for tuning into this session of an overview of sexual violence. To learn more about our services and to connect with our mission, please visit our website at www.ywcaneks.org or our social media pages. We do not do this work alone. Our power comes from the women, children, families, and survivors we serve, and the generosity and support from our community.